Guys, hope all of us are doing fine. My name is Ernest, and this is Ernest Sciences and Mathematics TV channel. In this particular discussion, we're going to look at the concept of projectiles. And projectiles basically is one of the discussion of motion where we're going to look at objects which are going to be traveling under the influence of either gravity. And we're going to use various Newtonian laws of motion which we have discussed in our previous videos in trying to describe these specific objects which we are going to refer as projectiles. Sorry for that. In this particular case, we are going to also look at the interaction between, of course, the concept of gravity and this particular object. And I can give an example of this specific illustration for an object that is going to assist us in trying to particularly describe this particular concept of projectiles and the projectile motion. So in this case, we are going to have that particular object given as that one. So suppose we are going to consider this particular level to be the ground level from, or rather the ground level from the distance from which this object is situated. There's going to be a particular distance we can describe in terms of y. And we're going to consider that this object launches or is launched from a particular point whereby it's going to be traveling in that specific direction. So we shall have this one which is going to be indicating the direction of travel of this specific object. So we're going to see that this motion of this specific object is going to be influenced by the, of course, force of gravity. And of course, we are going to consider this specific motion of this object from a point perhaps which we can give in terms of A, or rather A. So let's say it have it along this x-axis in terms of x. Along the x, we can give it from A to B. But in a sense, this object is going to be having this specific aspect of what we refer to as the projectiles path given as that. So it's going to be traveling in this specific direction. So at this specific level of y at A, this is going to be the position of the object, and it's going to be traveling in that specific direction. So we can assume that from Newton's first law, if this specific object was to be traveling in a continuous path, then we're going to have no influence of gravity, and therefore there's going to be, so the gravity is going to be an external force which is going to be acting on this specific object, enabling it to, of course, change its specific position. But if we have a gravity-free path, then we're going to have this specific object traveling continuously with respect to Newton's first law of motion. Then therefore we can have a different description for the aspect of acceleration and perhaps a displacement and velocity for this specific concept of a projectile, whereby we're going to see that if we consider this aspect of this specific object for a gravity-free path, then therefore the acceleration along this x direction, which we have given in terms of this, is going to be given in terms of 0. So these are two different scenarios. But if we consider the projectile path, which is given by that specific curvature which we have shown on the board, then we're going to have its gravitation given as ay, which is a gravitational constant given by g, which is attraction due to the force of gravity. And this is going to be a constant given in terms of 9.8 meters per square second. And of course, that's going to be assisting us describe its specific, of course, acceleration. Now, if we consider this object to be an object which is going to be situated at a specific height from the ground, then therefore we are going to see that if upon release, this object is going to be experiencing what we refer to as a free fall. So in this case, I've discussed the concept of a free fall in one of my videos. So kindly check our description box and try to see what we had to say on that specific concept. Now, as well, we can describe an object which has been launched perhaps from a cliff to a lower section, which we are going to consider to be a specific nature of the object which we have given using our above illustration. So therefore, we can define a projectile as an object which once projected or launched will continue in its motion by its own inertia. And of course, we have talked about the concept of inertia, and of course, in this case, it's going to be influenced only by a downward force of gravity as indicated above. Now, if we consider the aspect of inertia which I've mentioned for this specific object, we are going to see that the only force acting upon an upward moving projectile is going to be gravity. And in some cases, we can consider a projectile to be an object which has been launched from a specific point. So in case we consider the ground level given as such, we can have an object which has been launched from a specific point, and it's going to be traveling in that specific direction. So therefore, we are going to consider motion over two planes given in terms of x and y, whereby we're going to see this object is going to be describing the motion in both x and y direction. So at this specific point, we shall have its initial velocity component given in terms of y naught, and of course, or the displacement along or the velocity component along the y axis given in terms of yx naught, and the velocity component along the y given in terms of y naught given as such. So at a particular point, we're going to see that this specific velocity is going to be, of course, a zero value, whereby the object is not going to be accelerating anymore, and then for it's going to start assuming a free fall from this specific level. So there's a specific description that we're going to do for this particular nature of objects, which are going to assist us in trying to, of course, describe the nature of forces involved. So therefore, we are going to see that for most projectiles, forces are not going to be required to keep the object in motion, but of course, it's going to only be required to maintain an acceleration, which I've already discussed according to this projectile path given above. So we're going to see that from the previous statements which I've said, for the case of a projectile motion, of course, we are going to have no gravity, whatever the case there is, whatever in the case of an aspect whereby we are going to have acceleration given in terms of 0. The object will continue to be in its, of course, state of motion as per the Newton's first law, but we're going to have some conditions attached to this specific motion, whereby gravity is going to be causing a vertical acceleration according to this specific case. And of course, we're going to have this specific result in what we refer to as a parabolic trajectory. So we can have this one given in terms of this parabolic trajectory. So the trajectory is the path which this specific object is going to follow from its initial point to the last one given as that. And of course, there are going to be two specific components of projectile motion which I've described being given in terms of the x direction and the y direction. And this basically a subsequent video. Now we're going to also under downward vertical acceleration, and of course that's going to be forming our specific description. So perhaps I'm going to give that one in terms of a problem set, which are going to assist us in trying to analyze some of the aspects of a trajectory that of course projectile motions. So kindly check our description boxes for various links of other videos, subscribe and engage us in the comment section, and also ring that notification bell to get various updates on our discussion in math and sciences. So that is it for now, guys. Bye, God bless you. Catch us in our next video.